So let's get to it, shall we? Joining us to start the show off, we have a campaigner, a writer, an activist. Jack McDonald joins us to have a look at some things Gaza. G'day, Jack. How you doing, man?
Kia ora korua. Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, doing very well.
Jack.
You recently have written, some musings and stuff about Gaza, and that's how I found you and thought we'd jump you on and have your. Do you want to give us kind of your abridged version of what you've been thinking about and writing about to do with what's happening in Gaza at the moment, and then we can move on into tonight's topics, but then the whole whānau will know who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've been seeing the same horrifying images that everyone's been seeing coming out of Gaza, and I'm lucky enough to have a fortnightly column for stuff, and so, I just felt it was really important to, for all of us who do have platforms, we should be talking about this genocide that is unfolding before our very eyes. It's horrific. It's unspeakable, the crimes against humanity that are being committed by Israel. And, I think it's very easy to get desensitized to the suffering that is occurring, but we shouldn't let ourselves do that. And, the tide is turning against Israel, as was one of the themes of my article, too slowly, but it is. And, we're now seeing even pro-Israeli voices in the US, for example, the head of one of the largest Zionist lobby groups, Democrat aligned, but still very much pro-Israel and Zionist, Jeremy Ben-Amir, said that he's now been convinced that what Israel is doing will be considered by the International Criminal Court in the future as genocide.
Yeah.
And so it shows, I think, that the pressure that has been applied by millions of people around the world is working, albeit much too slowly. And so we just need to ramp up the pressure even more. There's famine, across Gaza that's getting worse by the day. Unfortunately, this changing public opinion is too late for so many. Those tens of thousands who have been killed or displaced, but also those who are, slowly starving to death before our very eyes. So, I just think it's so important that we apply whatever pressure possible on Western governments in particular to, start to impose sanctions and real consequences on Israel for what's happening.
Yeah, and you've worked for the Greens and you've worked for Te Pāti Māori, and now you work with the CTU as well, as you say, with your column. It says in the Post, does it go up on stuff as well, or primarily just on the Post?
I think it goes to the press and the Waikato Times as well. Yeah.
All right, well, let's do this. There's been a lot of information. I mean, it just feels like, it feels like you could almost run 2 of these shows a day. That just feels like how much information comes out every day around the Middle East. And it is interesting, Chewie, me and you, I'm not suggesting that we did something wrong, but it feels like the world kind of let go a little bit of what's happened and still happening in Ukraine. You know what I mean? It kind of become second page news, third page news and we had a bit of a agreement with the public that we wouldn't let Gaza go. And I think that the evidence of the atrocities there is the media around the world has not been able to let Gaza go. So there's so much stuff going on at the moment. Let's have a look at one news tonight, the story that's come out today, because we have now talked about, places like Canada and I think it's France and the UK and other places recognizing Gaza. Oh, hi, you're Gaza. I know you from a time before. And something like 193 other UN countries. And New Zealand and Australia, I think it was yesterday, said that they're going to. And New Zealand's response to that was, we're definitely going to investigate whether we're going to. And that's where we're at the moment. And here's
we're going to talk to some people about talking about it.
We'll run that up the flagpole and see what happens. That's what they've been saying.
New Zealand's move to consider officially recognising a Palestinian state sparked fiery scenes in Parliament. This resulted in Greens co-leader Chloe Swarbrick getting kicked out of the House. The coalition government's facing mounting pressure and accusations that it's acting too slow after announcing it won't make a decision on Palestinian statehood until next month. Australia and others have already decided to back...
Chewie, that what you just said, kind of slightly in jest, tongue-in-cheek, is why? Why does this take a month? Like why does this take a month to do?
Well, Winston Peters said today that that we're extending talks to Turkey, Malaysia, a handful of other countries, and I just want to go, why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, by all means, talk to those countries. I think the thing that united all of those countries together is they're majority Muslim countries. But my whole issue is, what does their opinion have to do with New Zealand deciding to do something?
It does feel a
Like,
bit like
it's part and parcel with maybe the whole thing, but the best time to recognize Palestine was fucking months, years ago, decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
it does feel like we talked about this last night in Chewie. This is I think you said this first, so for your credit, just before I push play again, is it does feel like that idea that you don't do human rights via referendum, and us kind of going, I wonder what they think. I wonder what they think is basically a form of governmental referendum amongst other governments. We'll keep going on the story.
The move. We begin with senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed as war rages on in Gaza, with food and aid still restricted by Israel. Other nations like Australia are moving to recognise the state of Palestine, hoping it will bring about peace. We're now weighing it up too.
It's not a race. It's actually about the complexity of the issue is a serious one. It deserves a serious...
I don't know. It might be a race, Luxon. It might be a race.
If you're the last to get on board the human rights acknowledgement, and if you're the last to get on board with saying, oh, yeah, this is a genocide, you know, it is, you know, you're wrong, actually. The slow and steady does not win this race. This race is finished, and you need to identify that it's finished.
Weighing up of our position.
Gazans can't eat empty statements. People are currently being mercilessly slaughtered and starved to death.
There are accusations our government is dragging its heels.
It would appear the dysfunctional relationship between David Seymour and Winston Peters is the thing blocking that at the moment is an international embarrassment for New Zealand.
Chris Hipkins doesn't know what's happening in Cabinet because he got voted out of government for being useless.
Some worry recognising Palestine could be seen as rewarding Hamas for the October 7 attack on Israel 2 years ago.
That's the question. Who are you recognising as it currently exists? You'd be making friends with terrorists.
The opposition grilled the
What
Prime
a
Minister.
prick.
Do we start to bring up definition of terrorism and then link it back to what Israel's doing at the moment? Like, is this the time to now go, what is terrorism? I did this once, I remember, because it was the Iraqi war, when I was doing Talkback, and we were talking about terrorism, and I said, it was after 9/11, and I said on my show, I said, what country is causing more terror on the face? What country is causing the most terror on the face of the planet today? Does that therefore mean the ones causing the most terror are the biggest terrorists, which of course was America with their bombing schedule at that time, but it kind of feels the same. So when are we going to list out what things make up a terrorist group and then line that up against what Israel's doing to see if they, and I say this to kind of make the point rather than say, I don't need to be convinced, and then see if they line up to be tick, tick, tick on the terrorist boxes. You know what I'm saying? Actually, Jack, do you want to say anything to that? We'll cut you out between these little chats.
Oh, no, I couldn't agree more. You know, let's not talk about terrorism unless we're talking about the full picture. But, you know, what I would also say is that, you know, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it more soon, but like we were actually been much more than a slow follower because, you know, we should have recognized Palestine as a state years ago. You know, over 75% of UN member states recognized Palestine as a state. A huge chunk of that was in the 80s and early 90s. And it's really only, you know, European and Anglosphere states that are dragging their heels. And it's, you know, pretty despicable that we're a part of that cohort.
Yeah, very true.
We'll keep going with the story.
Is the Prime Minister finally willing to say that Israel's slaughter and starvation...
Chewie, I found a little highlight for you. Do you want to see, and it's not going to come right now, but this image speaks to it a little bit. Would you like me to show you today David Seymour being an absolute little bitch? Because I've got something that I can show you a bit later on. Would you like to see that a bit later on?
Yeah, I would. It could be almost any clip from any time. You haven't narrowed it down at all, but
the reason it relates to this has got to do with the a terrorist scarf. in the background there. But I'll show you the picture first, and we'll come back to it. We'll come back to it.
Of Palestinians in Gaza is a genocide.
What I know is that there's a humanitarian catastrophe happening in the Middle East. What I know is that we want to see peace and stability and security reign in the Middle East. And for that to happen, Hamas must release hostages immediately.
What will be left to protect in a month's time if the Prime Minister waits until September to act, with the Israel government approving further escalation in Gaza?
I would just say to the member, there are strongly held views on all sides of this debate across the whole of New Zealand.
Good guys on both sides. Oh, there's both sides to it. There's good people on both sides, you know.
There was an urgent parliamentary debate.
We are being left behind. New Zealand is being left behind on the international stage.
This is not straightforward or a clear-cut issue.
It is.
Some of our partners are in favour of
it is, actually. This is the thing. Like, there was a interview last week. Mehdi Hassan was in a debate, and the guy who was debating said something like, well, it's not black and white. And Mehdi Hassan just went, well, actually, sorry, genocide is pretty black and white. It is a black and white issue. So sorry, Uncle Winnie. It's not difficult. It's not a complex issue. It is that superpower bombing into oblivion that area who can't fight back. That's as really simple as that.
Others are not. We are not going to listen to scaremongers who couldn't even raise...
I just don't mean to interrupt the member, but I've had enough of that.
A fed-up Labour MP getting the boot from the House. Chloe Swarbrick soon followed. She urged the government to adopt a Green Bill to sanction Israel.
If we find 6 of 68 government MPs with a spine, we can stand on the right side of history.
That is completely unacceptable to make that statement.
Why?
Withdraw and apologise.
No.
Then leave the House for the rest of the week.
Happily.
Walking out in protest, then copping a serve.
And it's excruciating to watch Hamas propaganda being bandied around this House by those who should know better.
Sorry, I just wanted to give you the space to share your thoughts clearly there, Chewie. With nothing in the background.
Shit. Okay, so keffiyeh, which is what he's referring to is the Palestinian scarf, keffiyeh, as a terrorist scarf, is just outright Islamophobia. Just clear, it could not be more blatant. And I shouldn't be surprised, but to have an elected member of our government stand up and say something as dumbassed, as poorly thought through as that, I am not surprised that it's someone from ACT.
Well, there's more to come. There's more to come.
Our politicians with staunchly different views. Benedict Collins, One News.
All right, there's the first part of the story. That's the One News story. That's Helen Clark there. This is the elders, and I'll show you this clip now. You know what? I think with my reboot of the computer, I might have lost it. Let's talk amongst ourselves about what we've just heard, and I'll go try and find the clip I was going to play. Chewie.
So one thing I want to go straight out of the gates is that Chloe didn't accuse anybody of being spineless. She just said she needed 6 of 63 or however many MPs in the government with a spine to vote for a bill. So if people are getting their backs put out by that, I think that says more about them than anybody else. I applaud her for saying it. And I applaud her for just going, yep, cool, I'll take it. Because it's true. It's this sort of action that needs more. The wringing of hands and talking about talking and saying it's all fucking complicated. I want to ask Winston, with his advancing years, how many genocides has he been alive for and seen play out over the history that he can't recognise one happening in real time? Maybe he needs someone younger with a TikTok account to show him what's going on.
Before we throw it to you, Jack, I found that clip. So this is, honestly, this is like the little kid at school telling on the cool kid at the back of the class. This is a little bitch moment like you've never seen.
Mr. Speaker, I draw your attention to the member who has just resumed her seat, which is adorned with a Palestinian scarf. And I invite you to consider what this House might look like if everybody who had an interest in a global conflict started adorning their seats with symbols of one side or the other of a conflict. I think that would bring the House into disrepute, and no member should be allowed to do such a thing, particularly when you yourself have forbidden members from wearing tiny pins on their lapels.
Simon Court's currently removing his.
There's a really important part to hear here, because what Chloe calls out really quickly is Simon Court, who's the guy that you just saw stand up. You listen carefully because you don't see her say it. But after he says the thing about adorning on your lapel, she goes, Simon Court's just removing his. So he was obviously wearing one, and Seymour dropped him in it as well.
Tiny pins on their lapels.
Simon Court's currently removing his.
Excuse me. No, I think you make a very good point, actually. I think I've been willing to accept that if people were wearing something that did not particularly... Oh, here we go. Good. Okay, we'll stay warm.
Obviously, we didn't see the footage, but she put it over her shoulders. So there you go. There's David Seymour being a little bitch. Jack, welcome to the show of sweary words at politicians. You're welcome to jump in and share your thoughts.
It's good. All power to Chloe is really my thought at this moment. You know, and this is not the time to be worrying about bullshit parliamentary decorum and standing orders, to be perfectly honest. You know, so many of those standing orders are put in place to try and stifle accountability of members of parliament. And I mean, as you said, Chewie, like it's she didn't even say they were spineless, but even if she had, you know, why should she not be able to? And I think it's now more than ever we need that kind of unapologetic honesty from our representatives. And you know, we're really seeing that on this issue from the Greens and from Te Pāti Māori, and you know, I think we should be appreciative of that. And you know, there's one thing I did want to say as well. You know, we've seen some relatively strong words from Chris Hipkins over the last few days, you know, saying that we risk being a slow follower and calling on the government to recognise Palestine. But I think Labour has a lot to answer for on this issue as well. You know, just in the last government, him and Jacinda declined to recognise Palestinian statehood. In 2021, there was a motion that Gaura's Garaman and the Greens put forward when there was another upflaring in escalations between Palestine and Israel. And at that time, the only party that supported it was Te Pāti Māori. So, you know, it's good that they've changed their position, don't get me wrong. And, you know, it's good that all of these different countries across kind of Western Europe are now changing their tune in response to this genocide. But it shouldn't have taken a genocide to recognise Palestinian statehood. They all profess to support a two-state solution. And if you support a two-state solution, then the precondition for even negotiating that should be recognising Palestinian statehood. And so I think if the world had moved faster and stronger on this, then Israel may not have had the political and social license to carry out what they've carried out. So I really think there are a lot on all sides who need to be accountable on this issue.
I want to have a look at this other story. Well, this is all part of the overall situation, because this has not made a lot of noise in New Zealand. I mean, I didn't watch the whole news tonight, so unless they featured it later on, I thought TVNZ with the former Prime Minister going to Gaza's border would have made more noise than it actually made. Now, the video here is not particularly good. We'll show the audio is not particularly good, but this is Helen Clark at the border going into Gaza. Let's just have a look and a bit of a listen.
Be given some money to buy another house in another area or in this area whatsoever. Once this buffering zone is prohibited for anyone to walk inside it or even breathe inside it. Thank you very much, and I will hand. Do you have any questions so far?
So when someone comes, when it's possible, again, for health reasons, are they driven to the other side?
Yes.
Okay, this is one of our logistic facilities.
So there's a gentleman there just talking to me about logistic facilities there. And I think, correct me if either of you guys know, I think she's on the Egyptian side, because as we speak, she's currently in Cairo. So I'm assuming that's the side she's on. After going to the Gazan border and seeing aid get turned back, Helen Clark has withering words for New Zealand. I'll move my mic because I'm going to do some reading for you, Whānau, because we don't have any more video for this. This is Helen Clark at the border. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark has made a heartbreaking visit to the Gazan border, saying she had witnessed first-hand aid trucks being turned around by Israel. Okay, first-hand account. Eyewitness, former Prime Minister of this country. Clark visited the Rafah border crossing, the sole crossing point between Egypt and Gaza, alongside former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson. The pair made a visit on behalf of the Elders, an independent group of leaders formed by Nelson Mandela in 2007. Clark said she saw trucks with food and medical supplies turned away by Israeli authorities and visited victims of the war in Al Arish Hospital in Egypt. A statement from the elders said Clark and Robinson witnessed massive quantities of food and medicines like ibuprofen ready for delivery to Gazans, but blocked by Israeli authorities. It was heartbreaking to think that a short distance from where we stood at Rafah, people are being killed at food distribution sites and children are dying of starvation, Clark said. This war must end. New Zealand is yet to recognise Palestine as a state, but Prime Minister Christopher Luxon announced on Friday that Cabinet had met to discuss the issue, with Foreign Minister Winston Peters saying a decision would be reached by the end of September. Luxon probably said that there was, quote, no role for Hamas in any future Palestinian state. Speaking to RNZ Morning Report on Tuesday, Clark said that the international community, including New Zealand, could be doing more. New Zealand seems to stand for nothing. This is a catastrophic situation. And here we are in New Zealand, somehow arguing some fine point about whether we should recognise we need to be adding our voice to the need for this catastrophe to stop, Clark told RNZ. When you see an unfolding genocide, you have a responsibility to act, she said, describing the US position that recognising Palestine as a state rewards Hamas as, quote, pathetically empty words. Continuing with a quote, this is not the New Zealand I've known, Clark said, claiming New Zealand was, quote, cuddling right back up again to Washington, D.C. We now really seem to stand for nothing except, somehow wanting to save our own skin in a tariff war, she said. Foreign Minister Winston Peters said on Monday, ministers would be taking into account the views held around the country. It is only right that this complicated issue be approached calmly, cautiously, and judiciously. His statement said, over the next month, we look forward to we're going to do a general, we're going to have a bit of a chin wag. We look forward to talking about genocide, canvassing this broad range of views before taking a proposal to Cabinet. Again, that's Helen Clark, first-hand account, saw Israel turning back aid trucks, so we can tick that box now, right? People who are saying they don't do that, it's not happening. We've seen it from both sides. We've seen last time, Chewie, you were with us, 2 weeks ago, we were showing video of Israeli activists going into areas where the trucks are so that the soldiers would lock those areas down and not allow the trucks to go through. And now we're seeing from the Egyptian side, obviously, they're leaving Egypt and they're getting to the border, and Israeli officials are on the other side, and they're saying no, they're stopping them as well. Jack, your thoughts, sir?
Good on Helen for using her position of influence and actually going, to the border of Gaza, to Rafah, to highlight these atrocities. That's the kind of leadership we need in this moment. And there's some really strong comments there from her. And I couldn't agree more that the government, not just on this issue, but across the board at the moment, has been really tying itself to the US in so many ways, and I think that is probably a big part of the reluctance from cabinet ministers to take a stronger stand. And it's disgraceful. We should not be letting our moral position fall by the wayside because of trade negotiations. Like, that's just disgraceful if that is the case. And I think she makes a good point to highlight that it probably is.
Of course, there is that other side of this, Chewie, and we could have mentioned it before I started reading that article, how David Seymour seems to be showing more concern for a piece of clothing that Chloe has obviously worn into the chamber and then taken it off and put it over, like a guy would a jacket. He has more concern around that than actually what's happening in Gaza, because he's made more noise about that than what's going on in Gaza. Yeah, sorry, dude, go.
It's worse than that, Pat. He was just finding a way to link it back to the fact that they passed a ruling saying they couldn't wear ACT badges on their lapel.
Yeah.
That was his focus there, was to bring back that issue rather than anything else. Like his comments about, and Luxon made these comments as well, of like, well, the hostages have got to be returned. The hostages have been offered back.
The day after.
And Israel declined the deal, spun it out for a couple more months of bombing hospitals and running people over with bulldozers. And then made the same offer with some slight tweaks, and then didn't want to do that either. The hostages have been offered back several times, I think a half dozen times at this point. Israel has probably killed more Israeli citizens than Hamas did at this point. And that is a doctrine that they have. That is something that they will do. If they think an IDF member is about to be captured, they would rather kill that IDF person than let them be taken hostage. They have no qualms about this. This is not about the hostages. It hasn't been about the hostages for ages. It is just a talking point in the Western world to justify umming and ahhing our way through it. If we're going to say we support a two-state solution, but Hamas can't be part of it, then the flip side of that, if we're talking about both sides, as Luxon seems to be pretty clear about it, then the two-state solution also doesn't include the IDF. Because you cannot have a two-state solution here when one state has been lying, has been moving the goalposts and moving the border whenever they want to, because it's backed by some of the most technologically advanced military hardware on the planet, and the other side can sometimes get a satchel charge into a tank that's not paying attention, can sometimes cobble together a missile and fire it from a park. That is not a two-state solution. I think we need to recognize Palestine now. I also need to say that we need to follow that up with a ship full of aid and setting up a tent in the middle of Gaza City as our fucking embassy and dare Israel to do something. And if it's not us, it should be someone else. But I'm sick of watching this play out in my pocket every day. I am sick of thinking back to other times that the West has failed to act or acted too slow. Rwanda, Srebrenica, all of these other times. We are doing it again.
Jack.
Well, I just saw someone in the chat say UN peacekeepers, and I think it might have been the same debate that you mentioned, Pat. I watched with Mehdi Hassan. He was making the same point. He was like, long gone are the days when West used to send in UN peacekeepers to prevent human rights atrocities and genocide. That doesn't seem to be in the discussion at all. Yet why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we send in neutral troops to actually to prevent ongoing genocide and to ensure that those supplies and resources can get through? Because at this point, otherwise we are just complicit in all of us are complicit in this famine and this genocide. And complicity is an appropriate word, but it doesn't really capture the full extent of the situation. The West has funded this genocide, armed the oppressors, prevented legal avenues in the international criminal justice system, and Israel is a rogue state at this point. Over the last 2 years, they've bombed 5 sovereign nations, and we're allowing them to rip up the post-World War II international order. And it's time we actually stood up for peace and human rights.
Chewie, you just said something real interesting. Made me think. I've been searching and trying to find an answer. I understand that once you've served in the IDF, you are no longer conscripted, but you kind of go into that reserve status.
Yeah.
And so this is what I was thinking actually. First time I've thought about it, and you caused this brain to fart this thing out. If former IDF soldiers, which is a good portion of society because of conscription, are still seen on some level as the ability to serve, then they become collateral damage to blowing up a hospital and justifiable in the eyes of the Israeli Defense Force and government because they've signed on to defend the country. So they can justify it on their side by going, former IDF soldiers, they know the deal. And then they can justify it front-facing the public by saying brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, hostages, and kind of play both sides. So they can both find a reason that it's okay to level a building they might be in, and also play the empathetic card to the public about how it's all Hamas's fault that they were in that building. You know what I mean? It just feels like they can do it both ways. It's what they might be trying to do.
Yeah, there's no way that there's proportionality or any parallels. Like this is one of the things that infuriates me, right? The entire population of Gaza is being held to the standard of 20 years ago they voted in Hamas. Now that was a Hamas that was secretly backed by the Israeli state.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're essentially under siege by this other country, and that's how people are naturally going to react, right? But Hamas was also, yeah, sure, they're the terrorist organization. They had a standing military force of some note, but it was also who was picking up your garbage and making sure that your building had power and water, right? And then they had one election, and then that was it. But that's enough to just blanket doom anybody in the Gaza Strip. It's also, Hamas is not the government of the entire Palestinian state. It's different in the West Bank. But the people in the West Bank seem to be copping it as well. Not to the same methodical, industrialized murder that people in Gaza are receiving. But they are still having their land enroached, their people arrested, shot. It is an apartheid state in that part of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
With Netanyahu's announcement that they're going to essentially annex the top third of the Gaza Strip, the one thing that jumped into my mind at that point is they are trying to control a crime scene. Like Gaza City is where this all kicked off. It's where the first bombardments happened. It had the first incursions. If they're able to remove entire buildings, move rubble around, maybe hide a few thousand bodies here and there, then the proof that organizations like the ICC need, like they were able to go back into Bosnia and find mass graves and then link them to units that were in the area, they're not going to have this opportunity in Gaza. So people are going to get away with this.